Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're well. Now, I've been using GH5 for quite some time, and a lot of the videos that I've got on my YouTube channel, whether I've been shooting them professionally or for personal work or just creating YouTube content, have been shot using the Panasonic GH5. I've done reviews on that camera, I've talked about the lenses, and I've always raved about how amazing that camera is, and I will still say today it's a fantastic piece of kit. However, recently I sold the GH5 and I bought a Sony a7 III. Now, just before you get annoyed at that, especially those of you that have been following me because you also use the GH5, let me go through the reasons why I decided to change. First of all, I'm a photographer and I also shoot video as well. Predominantly, I work with models, I do portraiture work, fashion work, so I'm always dealing with people. And when I'm shooting photographs, I'm using my Canon 5D Mark III. It's a full frame, 21 megapixel, excellent camera, and I've been using it for nearly 7 years. When I want to shoot video, I'm having to move over to the GH5, which obviously is a different camera, it's a different system. And it got me thinking, why not go to a system which is going to have fantastic full frame photographic stills, but also excellent video capability? And that was one of the reasons why I went and purchased the a7 III. Now, having the a7 III for approximately 2.5 to 3 months and using it quite extensively, I wanted to share my views on the camera and what I actually still really miss about the GH5. Now, number one is 4K 60 frames per second, which is a really big deal. 4K, obviously, lots of resolution, great quality, and you have the ability to crop afterwards in post, reframe, and if you're then exporting to 1080p, the footage still looks great. 4K 60 is a wonderful frame rate for me, my aesthetic, what I like in terms of slow motion. I just really like the way it looks. Not so much 96, 100 and above. I really always like the 60 frames per second aesthetic. Now, coming over to the Sony a7 III, I knew I would not have that in 4K. I have to go to 1080p HD in order to get 60 frames per second, which is a little bit of a bummer, to be honest. And I always find that looking at the 4K footage from the a7 III and comparing it to the 1080, it's literally like night and day. The 4K footage looks beautiful, sharp, crisp, and the 1080p footage is, well, it's 1080p footage. It's not bad, but it's not really great either. Number two is the IBIS in-body image stabilization that you get with the GH5. It is worlds apart compared to the in-body stabilization or the steady shot that you get in the Sony. The GH5, you could literally go freehand, no need for a tripod, no need for a monopod, just the camera, and you get beautiful, smooth footage. The Sony, you really don't get that. It's great when you're using the steady shot for photographs. You can shoot at really slow shutter speeds. It's amazing. But when it comes to video, I find the in-body stabilization really not great. And especially if you're using it with lenses like the Sigma 35 1.4R or any glass which does not have stabilization in the lens, unless you're using a gimbal, I find handheld footage is not the best. The next thing is the screen quality in the GH5, that flip out screen, it's better quality. The resolution is better, the image looks better. When you punch in to zoom in to check focus, it's clear, it's sharp, it's pristine. Unfortunately, the Sony resolution is nowhere near as good. When you double tap to come in, the image is fuzzy. You can't always tell if you're perfectly in focus. You really have to have peaking on there. And to be fair, it's just not as good. So those are the things that I do miss about the GH5, but there are some advantages coming over to Sony and this camera in particular that I want to share. So number one is, yes, the autofocus. Now, I've never really been an autofocus type of user simply because I had the GH5. And if you use the GH5, you don't use autofocus. But the Sony autofocus is on another league. It's fantastic and it is usable. I've been doing shoots where I'm on a gimbal, I'm working with models, I've got face detect on. It's keeping track of the models' faces. I'm moving forwards and backwards with the gimbal. Everything's in focus, it's great. And then when you come to taking pictures, that's when the game really changes. You've got eye autofocus. I'm using the MC11 Sigma adapter. I'm using it on my Sigma lenses, on my Art Series lenses. It locks into focus, it's sharp, it's accurate, and it just works really, really well. The next thing, as I mentioned, is the form factor. It's a small camera, but it's full frame. So now I've got a full frame, fantastic camera. And I say fantastic in the sense, the dynamic range and the information contained within the raw files is brilliant. I've literally tested the camera shooting 3-4 stops underexposed on purpose and then pulling that back up in camera raw and I can honestly say the quality of the image is better than the quality of my Canon 5D Mark III image when I've shot that perfect exposure, when I've shot that with correct exposure. The batteries last a lot longer than the Panasonic GH5. I've literally got 2 batteries. I did a shoot where I was taking photographs and video pretty much all day. I got towards the end of the shoot and I had about 15% left on the first battery, and I still had a second battery there. So battery life is brilliant. Now, another massive bonus is how this camera performs in low light. Now, you all know the A7 S2 and all those other cameras, low light, fantastic beasts of cameras. This is no exception. It's a brilliant low light camera. It's fantastic. You can shoot at nighttime. You can shoot with really high ISOs, far better than you could on the GH5. The image is clean, and the grain, the noise that you do get is just a very fine noise. It's not horrible in any way. It doesn't really pull away from the quality of the image, and I found that at night time this camera sick. Now, considering I bought the Sony to replace both the Canon 5D Mark III and my GH5, I have to be honest and say I still gravitate towards using the Canon when it comes to photography. There's something about that Canon feeling, the system, the familiarity, just the way it works, the speed in which I can shoot. I just enjoy using it more than I enjoy using the Sony. However, if I need one camera and I'm doing photographs, I'm doing video, I want it to be small, I want to do run and gun, I'm going to pick up that Sony because it's going to literally do everything for me. So those are the reasons why I went over to the Sony and what I still really miss about the GH5. Just remember, it doesn't really matter what piece of gear you buy. It really depends on your situation and your circumstance. Do I regret selling a GH5? Kind of. I wish I got 4K 60, but there is another camera that shoots 4K 60 frames per second, but it also does it in ProRes, and it has wonderful color science and a nice 5-inch screen. I think you know what that camera is. Stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to be shooting some clips with that camera, testing it out. It's also a camera that I've recently got my hands on, and I'm really loving it. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed some part of this video. Please subscribe, leave me a thumbs up, comment on the video. Are you using the GH5? Have you used the Sony? Are you a Sony user? Have you gone over to the GH5? So if you've got any questions, do fire away. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.